It's great to be here today. You know, my knees did hold up from playing football for 4 years, but you know all this stuff's coming out about concussions now. So if I just lapse and go blank here, you'll know I might have got hit in the head one too many times. Some people say, "How did you get into politics?" You know, I'm an engineer. I've got a forestry degree. Was enjoying life and doing all that, and I tell them I must have got hit too hard playing football when I was in college. But it's a real honor to be here with you today. I thank you for coming here from all across the state. It allows us being the congressional delegation, an opportunity to meet with a lot more of you. I know you had a big group in D.C. Not too long ago, and we had a good meeting up there. But this is a unique opportunity to get to be here and share with you some of the things that I've been working on and hear your concerns and things that you want me to be working on when I'm in serving you in Congress. I'll tell you, I just got back Saturday from a trip out to San Francisco. I went to the Berkeley National Research Laboratory. I serve on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, and I'm on the Research and Technology Subcommittee. And the lab had been asking me to come out. Plus, it's something that I wanted to see because they work on some really neat stuff out there. But I had some really, shocking things that I can report back to you. Some of the things, had you given me a list of 10 things I would see at the Berkeley National Laboratory, I wouldn't, and one of these had been on it, I wouldn't have been able to pick it out. And you know, it's spring here in Arkansas. We got all the pollen. But one of my favorite things about spring in Arkansas is when the turkeys start gobbling. But I was staying at the guest house there at the Berkeley National Research Lab, and the weather was just perfect. So I opened the window and was sleeping. About 30 minutes before daylight, I heard this familiar sound. And I woke up, and it was a turkey gobble. And I thought, is that what I really heard? And boy, it wasn't long till all these turkeys were out there gobbling. And from this hill out in Berkeley, where you're looking out over San Francisco Bay, I mean, it's just a huge metropolitan area connected to the California Berkeley campus. Beautiful place, but if you had told me I was going to hear wild turkeys gobbling at the Berkeley National Research Lab, I would have never guessed that. Well, come to find out, these turkeys are everywhere on the campus out there. And we started walking around looking at, neutron particle accelerators and one of the fastest computers in the world. And intermingled in that, you've got these wild turkey gobblers walking down the sidewalk, gobbling at you as you walk by. And they told me that they had a relocation program a few years ago where they would trap these birds and take them out to the game refuge, and so that was working fine until the locals there found out that when these turkeys go to the game refuge, they get hunted because they're wild turkeys. So there was all this public pressure, and they put a stop to relocating the wild turkeys off of the research laboratory. This is a security fenced area. They also had a lot of deer in there, and they told me there were mountain lions in there, which that made me feel real comfortable. But I thought, this is a nice place. They do a lot of good work out here, but I sure am thankful I live in Arkansas, where you probably wouldn't get a protest about relocating turkeys to a refuge where they could be hunted. And it made me think about all the other reasons I'm thankful to be from Arkansas when we think about how we view land use and how we view the future, and how we have a particularly strong passion for private property rights and us determining our own future in the way that we manage our natural resources, and the way we accept responsibility to be good stewards of those resources. And I don't think we have to have a nanny state or an activist group out there pushing us to be good stewards of our resources, because that's inherently who we are. We realize that if we don't take care of the land, that in the future the land won't take care of us. And I've always contended that the best or the most effective environmentalists are those who work the land through farming, who work it through forestry, who do other activities whose livelihood depends upon the land. We've got to get that message out to the rest of the country. Some of the things I wanted to share with you just from this trip to Berkeley I've got a huge interest in forestry. It's big in the 4th District of Arkansas. They're doing some work on drop-in biofuels that I'll tell you a little bit about that. But one thing I wasn't expecting over there was we had this meeting, and they've got Nobel laureates that live and work there, and we were meeting with some of them, and they were talking about challenges of the future. And I really wasn't expecting to hear this from this research lab, but they see one of the biggest challenges of the future is how we feed 9 to 10 billion people across the world. And they've done all these big calculations. They got this huge computer that was taking up a room 2 or 3 times the size of this one, and they're building a bigger computer next to it, and they're able to make these big models and crunch the numbers. And I found it interesting that they said what's going to limit our ability to feed a growing world in the future is phosphorus. And I said, if you'd give me a list to pick from, I wouldn't have picked phosphorus as a limiting factor. And they say the world's supply of phosphorus is getting so small that there won't be able to be enough phosphorus produced. They think we can continue to produce enough nitrogen, but they think the limiting ability is going to be phosphorus. But they were also talking about the research they're doing with microbes, and we know that with legumes you can fix nitrogen in the soil just with the microbes that are associated with legumes. Well, they think now there are microbes that can fix phosphorus, or at least free the phosphorus that's in the soil, so that at some point in time you may be able to not even have to use phosphorus fertilizer. You can have plants inoculated with these microbes that will actually work in the soil and free the phosphorus that's already there. So that's the kind of issues that they're working on. And I kept hearing this term out there called dark matter. And what they call dark matter is when there's something they don't understand. They say there's a lot of dark matter or dark energy here. And they were actually talking about research in microbes, and they said there's a lot of dark matter here. There's actually more that we don't understand about microbes than what we do understand. And they believe that as the science progresses in this area, it could be revolutionary to agriculture and to medicine and to a lot of other things that make our life better, or that our lives actually depend on. So the reason I share that is because technology is always changing. And in your lifetimes, you've seen the productivity of agriculture increase so much across the state and across the country. I remember when I was in Agri back in the 80s, and I saw Troy Buck here somewhere. There he is back there hiding out. Just the superstar here lately, been making it in all to the these winning these big awards and stuff. Yeah. I accidentally called him Troy Buck. I've always known him just as Mr. Buck, because I think anybody that went through Agri in Arkansas and got involved on the state level understood the impact that he's had, not just where he's been teaching at Hope or I want to say Glenwood, Centerpoint. Everywhere that he's been, he's had an impact. And I remember the statistics that were coming out when I was involved in FFA back in the 80s, and we've just blown past those levels of productivity now, and we're trying to figure out how to be more and more productive, and the pressure to produce safe and sustainable food supplies around the world gets more. So if you're in agriculture, the challenge is never going to go away. We're always going to have challenges that face us. And as I serve in Congress, I want to look at ways to help you face those challenges from a policy standpoint. And I know it can get very complicated. I know that the issues aren't always easy to understand, but that's why it's important to have venues like this where we can visit together. It's important for you to come to D.C. to share with me what's going on the ground, to share with me. Of course, it's not too hard to see how some of the overzealous regulations from the federal government are not only affecting you and your ability to produce, but a lot of other areas across the country and a whole lot of other industries. So I appreciate your involvement and your desire to learn and to know more and to influence the world around you so that you can do your job better each day. if we look at the 4th District of Arkansas, the data that we've been able to glean shows that we're the #1 poultry producing district in the whole country. If you take broilers and layers and turkeys and everything else, the 4th District of Arkansas is the largest poultry producing district in all 435 districts across the country. And then we still have a lot of other kinds of agriculture and forestry there. We're 87% forested in the 4th District. Timber is a huge part of the district. I think we've got a tremendous amount of resources in our timber. And that was another thing I was looking at out at the Berkeley Research Lab. They've got a new process that they're working on, not just to convert woody biomass, but any kind of biomass into a drop-in fuel, something that they can make this fuel and you can take it straight from the production process to your automobile. And using things like woody biomass is a lot better, it has a lot better energy balance than if you're trying to produce just like a given crop for biomass fuels. But they've developed this, they call it ion soup. It's a chemical that they put any kind of biomass into, and it breaks the biomass down into a soup, and they're able to go in and drive the ion liquid out of it, and they're left with a conglomeration of simple sugars that are very easy to ferment and to make fuel out of. And the guy that actually came up with this process, he also invented a very low-cost vaccine for malaria there at the lab. They say he's a candidate for a Nobel Prize, and apparently to really make your mark at Berkeley Laboratories, you have to win a Nobel Prize, but they've got a lot of them that have done that. So it's kind of exciting to see that kind of research and technology going into something that could affect all of our lives, especially in places like the 4th District of Arkansas. If you're familiar with how soybeans are processed, my first job out of college I was the plant engineer at Riceland Foods down in Stuttgart, and we had the soybean plant, and you crush the beans and you flood the beans with hexane gas. It absorbs the oil out, and then you cook the gas off and recuperate the gas, and you're left with the oil. That's kind of how they're doing that with this ion liquid. They soak the biomass in the liquid, it extracts the sugars out, and they get the liquid back off, and then they've got something that's very easily to ferment and digest and to make fuels and other products from as well. So I'll continue to follow that, and I think we've got just a huge opportunity in the 4th District of Arkansas, because we're so resource rich, to make our economy a whole lot better. Well, we've got the things that the whole world needs. We've got great production agriculture. We've got timber. We've got oil. We've got gas. We've got water. We're blessed with an abundance of a lot of those things. We got a tremendous amount of minerals and aggregates that can be mined in the 4th District. And I've always held to the belief that value comes from, or wealth actually comes from, taking your natural resources, processing those, and making products out of them that the world needs. And if you look around what we've got in our rich land base and our rich natural resources in the 4th District of Arkansas, as well as most of Arkansas, I think we've got tremendous opportunity to position ourselves in the future to convert a lot of those resources into wealth. But we need cooperation, we need research, we need strong policy that allows people out on the ground who are actually doing the work to freely do the work. And we need to get the hassles of regulators off of your back. That's one of the things I deal with more in my job as a congressman than anything else, is all these rules that agencies are putting out, whether it's EPA, whether it's Fish and Wildlife, whether it's Department of Labor. It seems like multiple times per week we get an inquiry from a constituent or a group on, can you help us here? This agency's overreacting, they're listing this species, they're causing us grief here, we can't even do our job. Here we are trying to make our economy stronger, and it seems like the government's working against us to make that happen. So it's frustrating when we're in the process like we're in right now, where people say, well, you're Congress, you've got control of the purse strings. And I'd say, yeah, in a perfect world we do, and we're trying to get back to that where we get to what's called normal order. I serve on the Budget Committee, and we're working to get the budget passed because that's the first step in getting to appropriation bills. I've seen people come into committee meetings that I'm on, the Bureau of Land Management, come in, and it might as well have been a room full of kindergartners there talking to them. They basically didn't have any respect that they were in a hearing with members of Congress, which personally it doesn't offend me, but when I'm sitting there in a committee meeting in Washington, D.C., I'm the voice for 750,000 people in the 4th District of Arkansas, and I don't like to have Washington bureaucrats be disrespectful to me or any other member of Congress, because I think it's being disrespectful to our constituents back home. But this particular meeting, there was an issue down in Louisiana where the Bureau of Land Management's claiming the Louisiana Purchase Survey that was originally done was done incorrectly. So they had given notice to all these landowners down there that they didn't have clear title to their land. So, the way the process worked, the federal government did the survey. They deeded the land to the state of Louisiana. Louisiana sold the land. It's been subdivided, sold, resold, no telling how many times. And they're probably right. The Louisiana Purchase Survey probably wasn't accurate in that area, but that's not the first time this has happened. There's a procedure in order where they can fill out a piece of paper and have it verified and make everything okay for the landowner. But the Bureau of Land Management kind of doubled down in this particular instance. And you got all these families and businesses and landowners who don't have clear title to their land. So they can't sell it. They can't borrow money against it. They can't really do anything with this land. And so we ended up calling this guy into the meeting, and he basically acted like, you can't touch me. We'll do whatever we want to. You're just going to have to lump it there, Mr. Congressional Panel. And I don't like that kind of attitude with bureaucracies towards the people's branch of government. So I say that just to illustrate how important it is to get back to this regular process where we're doing individual appropriation bills, so that when that appropriation bill comes up for the Bureau of Land Management, we can go in and we can write people's budgets out of existence. We can write their jobs out of existence if we've got their appropriation process. And I long to get back to the day where we get normal order so that we can do that, so that people don't come into those committee meetings and just thumb their nose at the American people because they know that we're in a state of chaos and we can't touch them in their agency or their job. I went to a field hearing out in Utah, and I saw this is where this kind of stuff's kind of running rampant with the federal government policing agencies out there through the Bureau of Land Management. And I think we're going to see more and more of that as Congress, if Congress doesn't get back to regular order and start passing these appropriation bills and tightening up the purse strings on these agencies, we're just going to see the agencies grabbing more and more power and expanding their overreach. So those are some issues that I deal with on a daily basis. I could tell you many other stories that go along with those. Things that kind of are close to home. I know there have been some groups come up talking about the trade with Cuba, and I researched it some more on the bill that Congressman Crawford has on allowing our rice to be sold directly to Cuba, and I ended up getting on that bill as a co-sponsor. I'm opposed to us sending a lot of U.S. cash into Cuba because at one time they were one of the largest state sponsors of terrorism in the world when they had money. If they're going to be getting our rice anyhow, I don't mind selling it direct to them. I still have problems with us opening up all kinds of travel and trade where we're injecting U.S. dollars into a country that has a past history of sponsoring terrorism targeted towards the U.S. Zach, we good for questions? All right, I could go on, but I want to make sure I leave time to take questions that you have. Yes, sir.
Cuba first, since your last name. Is there some kind of schedule to open up this to tourists or open up that to commerce, industry? Is there any
Well, the administration's already opened it.
timeline for that?
I think it's already happening. I know there's already more flights into Cuba, and there's more people going there for tourism. So I think that's already happening to some extent, and I think that may be a little bit of a slippery slope that we're on. I've always thought that using things that we produce in this country as a foreign negotiation tool is not a good thing. I remember when I was a kid and we had the grain embargo on Russia, and the only people that hurt were American farmers here at home. There's better ways to be involved in foreign policy than hurting producers here in our country and denying, one of the basic things that people need in food to people in other countries.
Knowing that you're a forestry-oriented person, what can we do in South Arkansas to get our prices up, and I guess get more places maybe for us to market the timber that's in South Arkansas? And do you see any other anything that we can do to help in that process, any at all?
Yeah, I think as Farm Bureau, there's a lot of things that you can do, and Caleb, you hit on a very important issue. Is we need more markets for wood products. We've got a great story to tell with wood. It's renewable. It's very energy effective when the unit of energy used to make lumber versus the unit of energy used to make concrete or steel. There's a lot of good stories you can tell about wood. I remember, y'all mentioned I was on a school board. One of the things I faced on the school board is we were building this new school building, and it's when construction prices were really high, and we got the bids back on the project, and we'd had a bond approved. We had a set amount of money to build this project, and we got the bids back, and the project was way over budget. And I started doing a little research, and we had just changed a rule that we had in the state of Arkansas that said you couldn't use wood in a school building. Now, my question was, how did we ever let somebody make a rule in a state that produces so much forest products that you can't use wood in a school building? And I'm not sure how that came into existence, but I know it was changed, and we redesigned and repriced the school building. And I had to kind of twist the architect and the engineer's arm to get them to do this, but we went from $143 per square foot to $102 per square foot, and I think had a much nicer facility when it was all over. Instead of being $1 million over budget on the project, we were about $2 million under budget, and it allowed a lot more funding for the school to do other projects that were greatly needed. As far as what Farm Bureau can do, you need to look for opportunities to help promote the use of wood products, whether it be in construction or in renewable fuels, or wherever that we can use these wood products. Anything that uses it is going to make the markets even better. There's some design contests out there where they're doing 10-story wood frame buildings. That would be great if we could get more wood products into taller buildings. There's a big market there. One thing that people have a misunderstanding about is, and I found this out when I was researching for the school building, out in California they use wood in about over 2/3 of all the school buildings. It may be up closer to even 80% of all the school buildings because of the seismic zones. Wood performs very well in an earthquake. We live in a pretty substantial earthquake zone right here in Arkansas. So you've got that going for wood construction. There's always new products being developed with engineered wood products that allows more and more applications for them. One thing that I'm excited about is the University of Arkansas is building a new materials lab in their College of Engineering, and they're putting a wood testing facility in there. And part of the reason they're doing that is so that they can help develop new markets for wood products in the state. And also the new dean of the Fay Jones School of Architecture is a wood guy. He spent a lot of time over in Scandinavia doing wood designs. One of the big hurdles in getting more wood products into construction is getting the architects and the engineers educated on it and having them feeling comfortable to use those products in their design. You know, things like that, along with research and technology, and we can make biofuels, we can make it out of a lot of different materials, but we can't make them cost effectively right now. There's no process that, if it just had to stand on its own on economics, could compete with traditional fuels. But as we spend more and more money investing in research and technology like they're doing out at the National Lab in Berkeley and other places, then we can create markets, and it'll be a huge as far as helping our forest products industry. We've got a lot of national forest in the 4th District, about 2.5 million acres of federal land. We don't necessarily need that land to produce timber because our timber markets are already can't keep up with the amount of timber that we're producing on private land and other land. But we need an industry to help keep those forests sustainable. If there's no markets for the material that you're taking off, then you end up leaving the material on the forest and it goes up in smoke, and it ends up costing the taxpayer in fire suppression dollars. We keep having record amounts of forest fires on federal lands every year. We had 10 million acres burned last year. Over half of the Forest Service's budget goes into fighting wildfires. And the next biggest cost is litigation, and then the lowest cost is forest management, which it should be opposite. We should be spending more money on forest management than anything else. So there's a lot of areas where we need to develop more products for the good of the economy and the good of the environment. That's something that we really need to focus on. Yes, sir.
Congressman Mike Free, State Board Member, and actually your last few comments have led into the question that I was wanting to ask you. A lot of the members in this room were at the American Farm Bureau Convention down in Orlando, and Secretary Vilsack told us there that he was no longer going to borrow dollars from other operations within the U.S. Forest Service to fight wildfires and to suppress them, that if Congress didn't appropriate the dollars, he basically led us to the belief that these fires were not going to be suppressed. And I was wondering your thoughts on that, or what Congress was going to do, or are we just going to have to what's going to happen when these wildfires occur?
Yeah, I haven't heard that, Mike, but that's interesting. I can tell you what we've already done in Congress. I serve on the Natural Resources Committee. I'm the only forester in the House or the Senate, and I'm one of 12 professional engineers. So I've kind of taken on this role as the forestry expert, whether I am one or not. They all kind of come to me to ask questions about forestry. Last year, as a freshman, the chairman of the Natural Resources Committee came to me and said, "Hey, you're a forester. We need a new forestry bill. Would you write the bill for us and run it through Congress?" So I was honored as a freshman to get to be the author of the 2015 Resilient Federal Forest Act. It was I think, a fantastic bill that we had bipartisan support on. It addressed the issue of fire borrowing. We said that major catastrophic events would be classified as that. We were going to amend the Stafford Act and use FEMA funding to fight wildfires, which to me makes perfectly good sense. It's actually what the Forest Service has asked for. It's what the administration has asked for. We passed it out of the House. It's sitting over in the Senate getting all moldy right now. Because of some other provisions in it, the administration, they didn't issue a veto threat. They just said they didn't like the bill, so it's not moving. But we've actually solved that problem of fire borrowing with the bill that we passed out of the House, and I hope to continue pushing forward with that bill and getting that signed into law. it just makes a whole lot of sense. There's no downside to a healthy forest. You get cleaner air, cleaner water, you get better wildlife habitat, you get better economies. If you're worried about carbon in the atmosphere, a healthy forest pulls more carbon out of the atmosphere and sequesters it. Whatever your perspective is on the environment and on the economy, it's hard for you to argue that there's a downside to healthy forests. And that's what this Resilient Federal Forest Act is all about, is healthy forest. It's about untying the hands of the professionals that are out there managing the forest to allow them to do that, and getting away from all the external environmental extremists that are making money off of the system by filing lawsuits against these management plans that are often done through collaborative efforts, and they never get implemented because some environmental group files a lawsuit in federal court and ends up getting their legal fees paid for by us, the taxpayer, through the Equal Access to Justice Act. Yes, sir.
Last question. Can you give me an update on the Antiquities Act that you're having to deal with in the west part of the land grab?
Yeah, it's the administrations continue to want to erect new monuments and use their executive power. I can tell you some other things about the Antiquities Act. I mentioned I was out in Utah at a field hearing, and I heard a story that I'd never seen in the news media before until I had been out there. I was expecting to go in and there'd be 24 to maybe 100 people at this meeting. Well, the first meeting we had was in a room that I think they said held 300 people, and the fire marshal was turning people out, wasn't letting any more in. It was jam-packed. The second meeting we were at was in a room that they said held well over 500, and they were still turning people back. So people are very passionate about these issues out there, but there was a case where the son of a medical doctor got up and told the story about how his dad had practiced medicine in his community for over 30 years, was well respected by everybody in the community. He had found an Indian bead and had showed it to someone. And really, if you pick up any kind of Native American relic and keep it, you're in violation of the Antiquities Act. So the Bureau of Land Management sent an undercover agent in to try to get him to sell him the bead and tried to find out if he had other artifacts. And to make a long story short, he was at the hospital doing rounds one night, and the BLM shows up with armed agents and armored vehicles. They bust into his house, take his 5'2", 70-year-old wife, handcuff her, and ransack the house searching for these Indian artifacts, which they didn't find anymore. They charged him with a felony, saying this bead was worth $1,500. Found out later that at the most it was probably worth $75. But the doctor committed suicide about 2 days later because of all this stuff. And these are the kind of stories you hear when you go out there, and these federal agencies are kind of running roughshod over state and local agencies as well. I had county sheriffs and county judges and commissioners stand up and tell their stories about how they feel like the Bureau of Land Management has come in and overrun their authority. They've got 9,000 employees in Utah, the Bureau of Land Management does. And I told them out there I was thankful that the Bureau of Land Management really didn't have a presence here in the state of Arkansas. And if they continued acting the way they were, their actions in Utah are going to cause some kind of a wide, across the country, congressional revolt, I believe, against their authority and their power. And I think you're starting to see that. The Utah delegation filed a bill to remove all law enforcement authority from the BLM and the Forest Service, which I think may be a bit of an overreach, but I can certainly understand why they're filing legislation like that with what's going on. If I used all my time?
Yeah, I think we need to kind of move on. I want to thank you for coming and speaking to us today and your service to Arkansas.